Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher's in the house today for a Mosher Monday. No birds on Sunday. By the way, Football at 4, it is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Well, Moshe, we got a day off on Sunday. Got a chance to clean out the garage and kind of check in on the rest of the league. But a lot of Eagles news. Nick Sirianni spoke earlier today. So let's dive into some of the stuff that's happening. What's going on, Moshe?
How you doing, Mike? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Sometimes I like the Thursday night game early in the year. I don't like it later on in the year. I like it early. And then Sunday, it's a nice day. I got a chance to clean out the garage and do stuff. I didn't feel like I was a prisoner of my television Sunday afternoon on a beautiful day. But let's look at some of the – did you do you had no Inside the Bird stuff yesterday?
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff around the house. I just like it because September's a really busy month for most, adults, right? I mean, you're getting back to the flow. If you have kids, they're getting back to school, fall ball. There's just a lot going on. So to get a game over with early in the week and then have that weekend to catch up is vital.
All right, let's start with something, that doesn't generally get the top of the list, but the Eagles signed a new punter today. And, just talk about the impact of that. Arryn Siposs is out. Braden Mann is in. Now, Mann's a guy who had a pretty good college career, and he actually got drafted, a punter that got drafted. So he was well thought of with the Jets for a couple of seasons, was in camp with the Steelers. But there's more to this story of why the Eagles made this move finally.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have been looking at Braden Mann since April. He went on waivers when the Jets were bringing back Thomas Morstead, veteran. They had, as you mentioned, they had drafted Mann. After 3 years, they wanted to bring Morstead back. No need to carry two punters. So Mann got waived. The Eagles tried to claim him. So the Eagles have been trying to replace Arryn Siposs since April, right? But the Steelers were higher in the waiver claim process and got him. And so, interestingly enough, I think what was going on, and I don't know this for sure, but it felt like a little cat and mouse at cutdown date here a couple of weeks ago because the Steelers kept two punters on their 53-man roster. And you wonder if they did that because they knew the Eagles wanted him and maybe they were trying to make a trade or just make it difficult for the Eagles to get him immediately. But for whatever the reason, two teams took the opposite approach. The Steelers kept two on their 53. The Eagles said, screw it. We're just going to keep none on our 53. They waived Arryn Siposs. They brought him back to the practice squad. A day later, the Steelers wound up waiving Braden Mann, who went unclaimed, or releasing him. I forget which one it was. But either way, he was out there. And, I sensed that with the Eagles having two games in such a short turnaround, Mike, their plan was, all right, we'll eventually get Braden Mann in here. We just got to get Siposs with his two elevations. He's important to our holding process. Now they've got a little extra time to work with Braden Mann, right? Because they're playing Monday night on the hold process, although it's not like anybody's in the building today, but they can get him in and get it started if they want to. So I would say that, yeah, this has been coming for a while, and it's not like Arryn Siposs' first two games that he did anything to make it seem like his punting was going to be any better. I think 43.5 was his average. Against Minnesota, it was like 34.5. So the move is made, and they're on to a new punter.
They are, and very rarely does a punter move lead the coverage for Football at 4. But Siposs has been an inconsistent guy, and obviously the punt in the Super Bowl did him no favors, and he hasn't done much. But how kind of explain to the listeners, Moshe, how this works. Siposs was actually on the practice squad. Mann is also signed to the practice squad, so they're going to have to elevate him much like they did. They'll get 3 chances. So this buys them 3 more weeks of roster moves.
Yeah, and, start to cue the circus music, right? If Braden Mann doesn't do a good job, there might be a new punter in here in 3 weeks from now. I don't think that'll happen. We'll see. But do remember that as much as the Eagles fans did not like Arryn Siposs and the Super Bowl horror continues to haunt them and all that, his ability to be the holder in the operation for the field goal kick has been pretty vital. You've seen Jake Elliott really ever since they moved on from Cam Johnson, who we were told years ago, just for whatever reason, the operation wasn't clean. And you saw Jake Elliott struggle a couple of years ago. He's had 2 really good years, and he's off to a really nice start again this year. I mean, he's starting to ascend into one of the better kickers and more reliable kickers, especially from long distance in the league, right? So now you've got a new person in that operation, that long snap to hold to kick. And if for whatever reason you're getting better punting from Braden Mann, but you're not getting a clean operation on the field goal kicks, that's going to be regrettable.
Geoff, other injuries to talk about, or injuries to talk about. I guess Siposs had been injured, but he wasn't injured during the season. But Avonte Maddox, the news today that he will have surgery. And what are the options now? Nick Sirianni said he's comfortable with the in-house options, but Zach McPherson was the guy that originally was the top of the depth chart. He's out for the season too. People forget that McPherson is now done. We saw Mario Goodrich. Is he the first guy? Will he get the first crack at this, or do you think there will be a little bit of Rubik's Cubes going on here this week at practice?
So I think that there's three options that stand out, and I will give you the three options from least likely to most likely. I think option number 3, the least likeliest option, is you see a lot of James Bradbury in the slot. They were cross-training him there. He's actually, some might describe him more fit to be a slot corner because of his lateral quickness than his downfield quickness. And we know they were cross-training him there a lot in training camp. I think that's the least likeliest option full-time because they're paying him $12 million plus a year, and you don't pay a guy $12 million a year to cover slot receivers and execute run fits. But I do think in certain packages against certain matchups, whether it's a flex tight end or when you move a decent receiver inside, you might see that. And then Josh Jobe come in to play the outside. The option number 2, second least likeliest, I think, would be Mario Goodrich. He is the guy that was your backup slot corner once Zach McPherson went down in training camp. But the reality is he's in year 2. He has not seen a whole lot of time in the NFL. I don't know if they want to trust Mario Goodrich to suddenly be someone who plays enough snaps to be considered a starter. I mean, nickel is the predominant defense in the league, which leaves us to option 1 that I think is the likeliest option, which is Justin Evans, who's been starting at safety, who played nickel last year for the Saints, played it some this year so far when they show 3 safety looks. He was the nickel interior cover guy. And then you can start Reed Blankenship, who should be healthy for Monday night, and Terrell Edmonds until you're ready to move on to Sidney Brown in some capacity. But for now, you could start Terrell Edmonds, you could start Reed Blankenship, and then when you're, have your nickel package out there, you could play Justin Evans in the nickel. That's what I suspect, Mike, they will do first.
Wow. Okay. That's a good one. I don't think a lot of people thought about Evans because obviously he was getting a lot of snaps at the safety position. We're assuming Blankenship will be back. Evans, then you're saying slides to the slot, and Edmonds and Blankenship get a majority of the snaps until maybe Sidney Brown is involved there. But Evans then has a much bigger role, or not a bigger role, but a different role.
Yes and no. I mean, it's different because he was starting. I mean, it's only 2 weeks, but he was a starting safety. But they were playing enough sort of 3 safety looks at times because of the injuries that they had both week 1 and week 2 to move him into a slot role. So sometimes you're calling it a slot, like you're calling him a nickelback. But sometimes if you're playing 3 safeties, you're just calling that big nickel, and he's just a safety who plays in the slot. I mean, it's really all just semantics, right? Yeah. So like where you line up. So he was lining up in the slot even before Maddox got hurt at times in certain looks.
Interesting move last week. I don't know if anybody saw this over the weekend. Rashaan Evans basically was signed and then never even made it a week here, decided that he was going to move on here. Why was that? Was that him? Was that because Nick Morrow played well enough? What is the reasoning why Evans was here for such a short amount of time?
Well, as we understand it, he has a better opportunity to go somewhere else and play, it's just interesting to me. I mean, we'll see where he ends up, but if I'm Rashaan Evans and if I'm his agent, who I think is Drew Rosenhaus, I'm looking at the Eagles and I'm saying, even if I'm not starting against Tampa or called up, elevated from the practice squad, it's only a matter of time, right? Because you got Nakobe Dean still out for 3 more games, and you're talking about Christian Ellis and Nick Morrow. Did Nick Morrow play well enough to, deserve some accolade against the Vikings? Yeah, sure. He wore the green helmet, the dot on his helmet. and everything like that. He's still a 218, 220-pound linebacker. So I don't know. I mean, I would have I don't like to tell a person what to do with his offers. I don't know who's knocking down his door, right, or what kind of offers he's going to get. But maybe it's to go on somebody's 53 pretty soon. But I think he would have been on the Eagles 53 sooner than later, just seeing what they've got at linebacker.
Yeah, I that was an interesting one there, right? Because you never know what the Eagles' linebacking situation. But where are the linebackers right now? Christian Ellis, Morrow, and Zach Cunningham, who I thought played pretty well. Not many people don't think of him as a cover guy, but has he shown improvement in that area? What do you look at the Eagles' linebacking core?
Yeah, I mean, I think he played better in the second week than the first week. I mean, at the bottom line, at the end of the day, is guys like Zach Cunningham and Morrow and Justin Ebb. I mean, you've got some I guess mediocre guys out there for certain roles, right? I mean that you saw how easily in the fourth quarter that they were able to score a touchdown. The Vikings were when they felt like they really needed it by throwing the ball around a little bit. Now, obviously the Eagles have gotten a great pass rush, great front four. Nobody's running against them, so that's helping out the linebackers. And the linebackers are doing a good job against the run because of the front four doing its job. So everybody's been fine there. But, I mean, if you're looking at the back end of the Eagles defense, it's got concerns. And they're one more. It's only week 2. You get 1 or 2 more injuries, and you're really, really in trouble.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast. Talk about injuries, because it looks like Bradbury, Blankenship, and Gainwell have a chance to play this week. Let's get your thoughts on how Nick Sirianni handled the Gainwell question today in terms of he got all the touches in week 1. Swift obviously took the touches in week 2 because Gainwell was not there. How does he and you foresee week 3 going with those two guys?
I mean, I can't imagine that you go into week 3 against Tampa and you go back to what you did in week 1. I just can't imagine it. That would be almost cutting off your nose to spite your face, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious that DeAndre Swift gives you a little extra juice and wiggle when he gets into the second level that we have not seen much of, if at all, from Kenneth Gainwell. That's not to say Kenneth Gainwell doesn't do a good job. And if he had played and got 10 or 11 to 12 carries against the Vikings, I think he too would have had a really good game, because let's face it, the running backs weren't getting touched for the first 3 to 4 yards of their carries. But Kenny doesn't hit the second gear the way and make people miss the way DeAndre Swift does. So I have to think, if Nick Sirianni is being honest about the whole hot hand thing, that you're going to see DeAndre Swift get a decent amount of carries. But I don't think it's going to be 80 to 20 now DeAndre Swift in favor of Gainwell, because pass protection's a really important part of what they do, especially when you want to throw the ball on first down. And both teams have come after the Eagles offense with early blitzing, both New England and Minnesota, before kind of drawing it back. Mm-hmm. And Gainwell is the superior pass protector. There were even times in the game against the Vikings where DeAndre Swift was just not a very good pass protector. And that can hurt an offense. So I don't think they're just going to go and give DeAndre Swift the ball, 20 times against Tampa Bay and only give 4 or 5 to Gainwell. But I do think DeAndre Swift now is going to be more involved than he was in week 1. Clearly.
Most through 2 weeks, what would you say, is there an identity on offense?
Man, no, not really. I mean, I think they're looking for it. I think they're seeing a lot of different defenses. They're seeing teams come at them early, like the Patriots and Vikings did, and then second half kind of drop off. I've never seen as many 3-man rushes as I've ever seen the Vikings did on Thursday night, which meant that every time that Jalen Hurts was dropping back, and this is mostly from the second quarter on, he's seeing 8 guys across the field, right? That's hard. It's hard to do that, to pass through 8 guys. And I think the Vikings are just so much more faster to the ball than they were last year. I think Flores had them playing with a lot more energy than Ed Donatel did last year. So they've got to find it, and Jalen Hurts got to do a better job of seeing everybody. There's always going to be somebody open when you're facing 8 dropping into a zone. It's going to be the flats are going to be open. There's going to be guys who are open quickly if you get the ball to them. So Jalen's got to do a better job on that.
Geoff Mosher, I want to get real quick thoughts on the defense and what kind of, Sean Desai now, 2 weeks. Have we learned anything more about him and what kind of is their identity on the defensive side of the ball? Last year, you take a look at Reddick. I think Reddick obviously hasn't been a big factor in terms of sacks yet. You wonder if that thumb, hand placement, getting a little grabby, can't do it. So what would you say so far Sean Desai's defense looks like?
Well, do you remember what I told you going into the year, what I thought would be an improvement on the Eagles defense as opposed to last year because of their personnel?
If they were able to get more pressure because they rotated guys.
Well, but I also talked about, I thought even with Javon Hargrave out and Jalen Carter in, I thought they were going to be a better run defense. And clearly they have been a better run defense. And by the way,
Minnesota didn't even try.
Right. They didn't. They had to give up. I mean, they got nothing, and New England didn't run the ball very well either, and they have some pretty good running backs. So I think that's going to be a big part of. I think with not just Jalen Carter, but obviously Jordan Davis's ability. We talked about that a lot, right? Everybody was expecting the Kobe Dean breakout, and I said that can't happen unless Jordan Davis has a breakout and is able to play 25, 35 snaps a game and keep the linebackers clean, and he is. And by the way, Fletcher Cox is playing more snaps now than he has in the last few years, and he's playing really well against the run and the pass. It sort of feels like there's a new energy, a new philosophy up front. They stunt a lot more, they twist a lot more, they get after the run way better than they did the last year or two under Jonathan Gannon. Now,
they don't blitz a lot more, Mosh. They don't blitz a lot more.
Yes, you noticed that, and then they're not going to.
Well, I'm imagining there's a group of people who just, and I say this before, you did not like Gannon, you just don't like the style of today's NFL that just doesn't let you do a whole heck of a lot. Now, a lot of teams don't blitz a lot. The Eagles are one of them. Are you okay with their secondary? They've given up a ton of yards in the pass game in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Vikings got most of their points right from the third quarter on. I mean, the Eagles were up 27-7 in this game. They were dominating the heck out of the game. And then you got the Addison touchdown, which, by the way, I think came on a blitz, if I'm not mistaken. And then in the fourth quarter, you had the Osborne and the Hockenson touchdowns, right? So I'm not quite calling it all garbage time points, but when you're up 27-7, things like that are going to happen. You're going to play softer zones. You're going to drop back. Mm-hmm. But you were up 27-7 on the Vikings. I think that tells you how much the Eagles were dominating.
And listen, I'm just giving you the other side. Is last year you played Minnesota and beat them 24-7. They never scored again. You were able to hold them to 7. And this year they did get those 2 late touchdowns. And again, they've been getting a lot of teams have been getting, Kirk Cousins had 4 touchdowns and almost 400 yards passing. Mac Jones had a big day too. So you're seeing a lot of big days from, Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins. I wouldn't say Cousins I'd probably put in the top 12.
Yeah, if I do remember, in week 2 of that last year's game, they did not have Hockenson yet, correct?
No, they did not.
They did not have Jordan Addison. They really didn't have a very good number 2 receiver. They were playing the BC Johnson as a tight end, I think, and they were playing Osborne as a number 2. Wasn't Dalvin Cook hurt also?
He probably was. Yeah, and I think a lot of people just want to see aesthetically pleasing games. That's all, right? They
right.
Why are you giving up 2 touchdowns late? I feel like this is the one thing I'll say about the defense late in that game. They led to a touchdown, but still. They made Minnesota go on a 10-play drive to score that touchdown, which essentially ran the clock out.
Mm-hmm.
So while Minnesota got a touchdown and a score, it took them 10 plays to kind of do it, and then by the time they did score, they ran out of time.
Right. And if Nick Sirianni, who apologized today for not going for 2 on the DeAndre Swift touchdown, if he had gone for 2 and they got it and they were up, that would have put them up, 14, right? Instead of they were up 13, they would have been up 14. It would have made it even tougher after the Hockenson touchdown because they would have had to have gone for 2 after the Hockenson touchdown, I believe. So at that point, because they would have been down by quite a bit.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast. Check that out at all your podcasting platforms and InsideTheBirds.com for more. He's back later on this week. Adam and Andrew, football at 4. Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a week from tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Geoff Mosher, good to see you, pal.
All right, my friend. Take care.
All right, and Geoff Mosher is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. This hour of the Sports Bash live at Ocean Casino. It is brought to you by Taco Cat. Got a craving for tacos? Then check out Taco Cat, 8 South Essex Avenue in Margate. Visit them at TacoCatSouthJersey.com for more information, or give them a follow at Instagram at Taco Cat Margate, and always look for the Taco Cat truck. All right, when we come back, we got the sound of the day today, which includes some stuff on NFL week number 2, the Dolphins, the Cowboys, the Bengals. We'll get into that and more. It is the Sports Bash, plus our same game parlay for tonight's Monday Night Football double dip. Don't go away. More Sports Bash coming up.